The 12th year of the college football playoff and the second season of a 12-team field, and the committee is faced with the most difficult and controversial decision in the history of the playoff. On Championship Saturday, two thrilling conference title games, one of them in the Big Ten, certainly established a new #1 team in the bracket in Big Ten champion Indiana. The ACC title game wreaked havoc with the final spot in the field when 5-loss Duke took down Virginia and maybe squeezed the ACC out altogether. But it was a giant dud of a game that could just mean more in long-term ramifications. Georgia's beatdown of Alabama in the SEC could pop the Tide's bubble while opening the door for both Notre Dame and Miami to find a spot in the bracket. But that comes with potentially earth-shaking impact on the future postseason framework. The decisions are due for the present right now. 12 teams in the college football playoff, and it's revealed exclusively in moments.
Welcome to the College Football Playoff Selection Show, presented by AT&T.
I think we all know no matter what, people are going to be really mad today.
The bracket is empty. It will not stay that way for long. A 12-member committee in Grapevine, Texas had, in my judgment, the most difficult decision in the history of the playoff, not just the 12-team years, of which we are in the second, but also in the 4-team era. There's no right answer here. Only wrong ones need apply, or at least there are better and worse answers. How did they arrive? There are a lot of people waiting with anticipation to find out what their playoff fate is. Some hanging in the balance, some breaking through for the first time. And we have people all over the country, 11 different reporters waiting for reaction to what the committee's decisions are. We'll talk about the teams who are sitting right on the bubble, most notably Alabama, Notre Dame, Miami primarily. Could there be other surprises as we begin this pursuit for the College Football Playoff National Championship Trophy? Reese Davis, Booger McFarland, Greg McElroy, and for the 12th consecutive year, all of the playoff years.
Welcome back,
Joey
Reese.
Galloway's
Welcome
here.
back.
Welcome back, Joey. It's so good to have you here. Joey locks in. He stays for the whole show. We're ready to go, Joey.
Let's go.
All right, let's do it. This is going to be really, this is a difficult decision, Booger, and I'm not trying to absolve the committee of anything. That's why they're there. But, boy, there will be consequences no matter what they decide at the end of the bracket.
It's going to be consequences. And anytime you have a subjective measure like this, you have to have something to stand on. The resumes are complete right now. And all the process long, we've been comparing Miami and Notre Dame, and the head-to-head has been talked about. Well, now that the resumes are complete, it's time to bring Alabama into this conversation. 10-3 Alabama, who they lost to, how they lost yesterday. And so I can't wait to see how this committee brings Alabama and compares them with Notre Dame and Miami. That, to me, is fascinating.
Let's keep in mind some resumes were complete before yesterday. And let's keep that in mind. This is the first year I wanted to go 4. I thought it was great. I didn't want to go to 12. Then we went to 12, and I said, hey, man, this 12 was pretty doggone good. This is the first year I'd like to have more. Give me more. There are teams in this year's season, you can say Texas, you can say Miami, you can say Vandy. There are teams that won't get into this playoff that could absolutely get in and win it if they got hot. I wish we could expand it, but we can't. We only get 12, and it's a tough decision.
It's brutal. And like you said, I think whatever team's left out amongst those three could theoretically win 4 games in a row and go chase a championship. I think Alabama's in. I feel pretty confident in that because they created that precedent last year with how they handled SMU. They do not want to de-incentivize participation in a conference championship game. So I think Bama's in a good spot, which takes us to the conversation between Notre Dame and Miami. In an effort to have better perspective on that matchup, I went back and watched that game from week 1. Notre Dame had no idea who they were. They didn't know their offensive identity, and they have since improved greatly. If they played tomorrow, I'd pick Notre Dame to win that game. But they don't play tomorrow. They played in week 1, and I went back and watched it, and Miami handled them along both lines of scrimmage. And I think if the committee went back and refreshed their memory on what that game looked like, they might lean towards the Hurricanes over the Irish.
They have not done that in any of their rankings up to this point, and with neither of them playing, that would be a question to be answered if, in fact, that's the decision.
So I agree with most of that there, but not all of it. I think they're going to move Notre Dame up so they don't have to compare them to Miami.
And been part of this
so I think Miami's going to be the first team out.
What are your expectations, and what level of controversy do you expect, regardless of the decision that's made by the committee?
Good morning. Yeah, you guys are all over. Let's not forget Duke winning as well. So more than likely get an opportunity to see Tulane and JMU, more than likely, I would think, get into this thing. But I think how they handle BYU, BYU losing a bonus game, as Greg just alluded to, are they going to be punished for losing the second time to Texas Tech, therefore putting Miami right next to Notre Dame? That would give Miami the head-to-head that they've been clamoring about for weeks and weeks. That would be the first time they'd be right next to each other. That would put Miami in. And I think, Boog, I'm with you. I think it's more of a Notre Dame-Alabama debate. I think that's probably what's given them the most headaches throughout the night and trying to figure out, well, Notre Dame has this eye test. They're playing really great football. Yeah, but Alabama went to Athens. They went to Athens and beat the same team they lost to in the bonus round. So, Greg, I think not just the game, the way it went with Miami and Notre Dame, I just think Alabama, it'd be interesting to see how they handle that when it comes to that big data point of going to Georgia and winning that game. That's going to be an interesting way to see how they decipher between Georgia beating them yesterday and Alabama winning in Athens.
Kirk, how would you evaluate these teams? Not just in terms of picking a winner, but like what would you value the most in evaluating teams who are close together and both have different points on their resumes or on their bodies of work?
Well, I just think if it's Miami and Notre Dame, I think the head-to-head finally at the end of this, when the dust settles, I think they're close enough that where the head-to-head comes into play. I think that's a significant data point that will give Miami the nod. That just based on the way they've taught us over these years, I think that if they're 2 or 3 spots away, I don't think head-to-head would come into play. But I do think if you get close enough, I think that's a pretty strong argument. Obviously, head-to-head should matter. Then I think with Notre Dame and Alabama, that's so difficult. I mean, and Joey's right. You could throw Texas into that argument, Vanderbilt into that argument. It's very, very tough how you separate those teams, because I think we all love how Marcus Freeman's team is playing on the field. How can you not? And then you could say, yeah, but who have they beaten during this 10-game winning streak? What really stands out? They went to Pitt, they beat USC, but is that enough when you still have that most significant thing to me? And I think, again, Greg alluded to it, going into Georgia. You could argue that's maybe the best win of the year across the entire country for any team. That's what, for me, I would be really struggling with. Eye test with Notre Dame against inferior opponents, or that impressive win by Alabama. I'll be very candid. Alabama's been leaking oil, in my opinion, during the last 2 or 3, 4 weeks, especially offensively. But will that matter when it comes to still, as they're looking at the entire season, the fact that they had one of the best wins in the country going into Georgia?
Yeah, it's about your full
season. It'll be interesting to see where Vanderbilt is, because
just
they might
about
wind up with
Bama
2 of the
looking
better
bad
wins.
the last
Both of them will be
2
better
weeks.
than Notre Dame's. There's no question. You watch them play right now. Notre Dame looks like, to use an oil metaphor, a more well-oiled machine than the Tide does, particularly on offense. Nick Saban is with us now, 7-time national champion. Nick, as you look at the end of the line here, what's the best way to evaluate teams when you have teams like Notre Dame, Miami, Alabama, even Vanderbilt, Texas, BYU, who have things in their favor, but is not really as clear-cut? What would you do in terms of best evaluating these teams?
Well, I think it's very clear that there's 7 teams that have established themselves as the 7 best teams. And, even Oklahoma, to me, has an impediment. They had a tough time scoring points all year long. Notre Dame started out not so good, not great schedule down the line, but playing very well and from an eye test, looked like a great team. Then you got Miami, who finished strong but stubbed their toe in the middle. Then you got Alabama, who probably had the most impressive run in the middle of the season when they beat Georgia at Georgia and then beat 3 or 4 more ranked teams at the time all in a row. And now lately, for whatever reasons, and injuries are a part of the game and you have to be able to overcome them, they're not playing as well as they did earlier in the season. And then you have arguments for people like Vanderbilt and Texas and even maybe BYU, and the whole question of how does playing in a conference championship game really impact your season when other people are staying home, and how can they get pushed ahead of you because of that? So there's a lot of issues. Right now, if we had AI and they had all the information, they would have one hell of a time trying to figure out what this committee's got to figure out in terms of these last 3 or 4 teams.
You know, that's the point, Nick. I think there are going to be long-lasting ramifications no matter what they decide. What impact would it have on the conference championship games if Alabama's left out? What impact is it going to have on scheduling should Miami be left out? And Notre Dame, are they going to look at them and say, well, you're not even, there's not even a possibility of playing in a conference championship game, but still, it's Notre Dame. You leave them out, and you also have evaluated the entire time of the rankings that you think they're better than Miami. So there are a lot of things to deal with. Now, 5 reporters in different places, different levels of controversy. Molly McGrath is with Duke, ACC champions there. This is probably a long shot. We've got Molly McGrath against Dana there, maybe looking for a spot in the playoff. But let's start with Marty Smith, where Alabama is probably most anxious today, Marty.
Indeed, Reese, good morning. If you look at 3 key metrics that the CFP committee must consider right now, it's strength of record, strength of schedule, FPI. Alabama is the only team in the United States of America that ranks in the top 10 in all 3 of them right now. I just left Kalen DeBoer's office. He makes it very clear we should not be penalized for earning the right to play in the conference championship game in the toughest conference in the country as the #1 seed. Yeah, we got beat, but there should be no penalty for earning the right to play in that game, especially, he added, while other teams under consideration today were sitting at home watching.
So those 3 metrics, that's a strong argument.
Let's head up to South Bend,
then you have, on the other hand,
is with the
if you lose 28-7, would
Good
anybody
morning,
else
Marty.
get
Yeah,
that
here on
benefit of
campus,
staying
the Notre
in?
Dame players and coaches are
BYU
gathering
sure
to watch
isn't.
the selection show. Their confidence is very high. They are confident in the resume that they put together. Those 2 losses at the beginning of the season, just by a combined 4 points to Miami and Texas A&M. They also think that those 10 wins that they strung together at the end of the season were dominant wins by an average of 30 points or more. That's best in the country over that time. And just a few moments ago, I heard from quarterback C.J. Carr, who said this, guys: we have continued to elevate on both sides of the ball. We believe we are one of the elite teams in the country, and we deserve an opportunity to prove it on the field. That's the story here in South Bend. Let's go to Chris Budden, who is standing by with the Hurricanes.
Hi, Jen. Here in Miami, there is optimism and confidence based on what happened yesterday and Miami's resume. But there's also frustration. In talking with Mario Cristobal earlier this morning, understanding why are we even having this debate when you look at all of the metrics of strength of record, same schedule, the identical metrics, the common opponents, and of course, the head-to-head, which is really what matters against Notre Dame. And if you look, since this format started, there's been 13 instances of head-to-head that were played in the regular season with the same record heading into championship weekend. In every single one of those, except for one, the team that won the regular season matchup was ranked higher. That one instance is this same instance of Miami and Notre Dame. While there is uncertainty here in Miami, there is elsewhere in the ACC as well, and that's where we find Molly McGrath in Durham.
Yeah, that's right, Chris. Well, the Blue Devils had the day off today to rest after a late-night overtime thriller in the ACC title game. But head coach Manny Diaz told his players to stay by their phones today just in case. So you're saying there's a chance. Diaz is watching the selection show at home with his family, but argued that Duke should be in over JMU because of their strength of schedule and JMU's lack of a Power 4 win. Whereas the Blue Devils just beat a top 20 team that had 1 foot in the playoffs. So I'm interested, Dana, how confident are they over there at James Madison?
I think James Madison's getting in,
well, Molly,
but it's not as sure as people want to make it
but
sound.
there's certainly some extra emotion from Coach Bob Chesney, who made it official yesterday that he will be the new head coach at UCLA. He did confirm if James Madison hears their name called this afternoon, he will coach this team through the playoff berth. And while no official watch party was held Saturday night ahead of the ACC championship game, star running back Wayne Knight did storm the quad on campus after Duke was announced as the ACC champion. And in this morning, Bob Chesney stating his case, saying we're the best group of 5 school, and it's not even close.
Dana, figuratively speaking on that, pitting you against one another, just the teams, figuratively speaking.
That one man stormed the quad.
Yeah, well, he stormed the end zone.
If anyone can do it, he can do it.
He's a really good back. All right, let's look at this. These are the selection principles for the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. Strength of schedule, head-to-head. Mario Cristobal's been pointing to that one. Comparative outcomes against common opponents. Miami's pointed to that against Alabama, too, comparing the Florida State game.
Is this criteria in order?
Key players and coaches may have affected past performance or postseason performance. An interesting note there because of the calendar. Whoever winds up in the field, you're going to have at least half of the teams who will be without either their head coach or their head coach is moving on, or an offensive defensive coordinator or assistant head coach, associate head coach moving on.
That is amazing.
Over half the field, in all likelihood, no matter how it comes out. In some cases, both coordinators are going. Oregon's going to be in. Both coordinators are going to be on the move. Still coaching now, I get that, but, you know. When you should be the most united is when you are the most distracted. Never distracted is Heather Dinich, who covers the college football playoff for us. So, Heather, and I'm not trying to absolve the committee. This is the business they've chosen. They've signed up for this. This is going to be a very controversial decision, no matter what they decide. What's it been like in the committee room?
It's been tense. Look, they met until 2:30 in the morning local time with most of their focus, debate, and discussion focusing on those 3 teams, Alabama, Notre Dame, and Miami. But it is important to remember the context of this season, how they've talked about them. While everyone outside the room is focusing on the head-to-head between Notre Dame and Miami, in the room this season, they've been focused on Alabama and Notre Dame. So the way Alabama played in the SEC championship game against Georgia very poorly opens the door for debate. They will certainly consider dropping Alabama, but how far? Miami needs them to drop to number 11. If that happens, Miami and Notre Dame are in, no matter what you think about the head-to-head. But they will also consider the fact that Alabama has the best strength of record, the best strength of schedule, and the best win of those 3 teams going on the road, beating Georgia, which is now the SEC champs. So they are considering all of those factors, but it also wouldn't surprise me because of the Alabama-Notre Dame angle if they flip those 2 again.
Heather, we will keep an eye on it. In fact, we're going to have answers shortly. I'm told that the rankings have come our way, and we will fill out the bracket. That means for a moment that Zach, our graphics operator, is the most powerful man in college football because they have to give it to Zach in order to type it up.
I like it.
So he knows.
See if I can text Zach.
Yes, Zach, what you got? No. We'll see them when you do. Rankings unveiled after this. The path starts right now with the unveiling of the 12 teams in the college football playoff. The journey goes to Miami Gardens, Florida, Hard Rock Stadium, January 19th. That is where the national championship game will be played. 12 teams in the field, the 5 highest ranked conference champions, no matter which conference they come from, and then the next 7 highest ranked teams after that will make up the 12 teams. So Zach, our graphics operator, has everything ready to go. So let's start with the number 1 team in the final college football playoff rankings. It is the Big Ten champion, Indiana Hoosiers. Indiana number 1 for the first time in school history.
And there wasn't an easier call made today than Indiana number 1. And my vocabulary is not deep enough to say what I think of what Cignetti has done at Indiana in the past 2 seasons. Last season, it was sort of like, okay, Indiana's a pretty good team. It's a 1-year run. And then to come back and do what they did in this season, they hadn't won the Big Ten since 1967. This football team is legitimate. I didn't understand how good they were on the defensive side and what they did in that game against Ohio State.
This is their first outright championship since 1945. Wow. Just this year, they got out of the cellar for the losingest team in the history of the sport. And now they go into this playoff number one, the Cignetti turnaround. With all due respect to Bill Snyder, Kansas State,
I thought Ohio State would be 3, maybe 4, but
Ohio State and Indiana just
thought they'd be 3.
Spots. So the last 2 national champions have been from the Big Ten, and 1-2 will again be from B1G.
And I think Ohio State, a little bit of question. Would it be Georgia at 2? Would it be Ohio State at 2? Either way, I don't think you can really go wrong. Ohio State's looked dominant all season long. They did not play well offensively last night. They struggled in protection. Julian Sayin missed some throws, and they missed a chip shot field goal that would have potentially pushed that game into overtime. And the committee has looked in the past at, hey, good loss, close loss, we're not going to crush you for it. They don't in the case for the Buckeyes as well, and I think it's probably makes a lot of sense to have them at 2.
Now, we've talked about this quite a bit. Remember, this is different from last year, the first year of the 12-team field, when you had the 4 highest-ranked conference champions getting the byes. Now it's just 1 through 4, no matter what conference you're from. So you have 2 Big Ten teams at the top of the bracket. At number 3, we presume, will be SEC champion Georgia, and it is. The Bulldogs avenged their regular season loss to Alabama with an impressive performance in Atlanta yesterday.
Without a doubt. And we came into this thing, I was talking about identity. And when it comes to identity, no one knows who they are more than the Georgia Bulldogs. They are a physical team, and they'll take you to the phone booth. And if you can't deal with them in the phone booth, you got no shot of beating them. Controlling the line of scrimmage. They held Alabama to -3 yards rushing. Hello. And you talk about Gunnar Stockton, his ability to improve throughout the season. And the defense was young early on, but they're seasoned veterans now. I don't think anybody wants to see this version of the Bulldogs.
Somebody's going to, but you'll have to win a game to get there. Remember, last year Georgia got a bye, didn't work out well for them. Notre Dame beat them in the Sugar Bowl. They'll try to put together a better run this time around. Number 4 in the final bye, meaning not getting a home game. And this is the only bad thing about Big 12 champion Texas Tech. Man, Lubbock would have been electric for a home game on campus. But the Red Raiders, Big 12 champion, their first conference championship since 1954. And the Red Raiders are seeded 4th, and there they are in Lubbock celebrating what Joey McGuire and company have done.
Yeah, and what they were able to do is beat BYU again. They forced 3 turnovers, beating them the first time in the regular season, came back and did 1 better, forced 4. That defense against BYU was outstanding. That is a football team. We talk about their offense, but their defense is about as good as we've seen in the country.
So Texas Tech goes in, and you know what? I believe with that defense,
these 4 teams right here are going to be really tough to beat them.
Especially that national championship.
That front 4, how they get after the quarterback.
No doubt. We have David Baylor, Mello Hyde in the middle, Lee Hunter, defense, and Jacob Rodriguez, best linebacker in the country, might be a Heisman Trophy finalist, if not winner. Now, team that has a home game, seeded number 5. The Oregon Ducks. So 3 of the top 5 teams in the country are from the Big Ten. Dan Lanning's team will open in Eugene.
And I just love when it comes to Oregon, they know who they are. Dante Moore's been playing outstanding. Kenyon Sadiq, the best tight end in America. The physicality they exude, another team that understands what their identity are. Haven't always played up to their par throughout the season, but they're starting to click on all cylinders, and it's going to be a tough ask. Whoever has to go to Eugene and deal with the Ducks at Outson.
And I think this upcoming number is the first one where there could be some drama at 6, because you look at it, all assuming that 11 and 12 are going to be G5 teams that won their conference. 6 versus 7 is potentially significant when you take into account what your first-round matchup might be. So will it be Ole Miss like it was last week, or will it be A&M, who dropped big time after the loss to Texas?
Greg, that is a tremendous setup, because it plays a huge role in who your first-round opponent is, and it is Ole Miss. Pete Golding's team now seeded 6th. They'll play at home against the 11 seed once we get that, which will be one of the last 2 highest-ranked conference champions.
And Oxford is going to be buzzing down there. Good for Pete Golding. He's now the permanent head coach. Lane Kiffin, the coach at LSU, allowed the OC, Charlie Weiss Jr., to come back and call the plays. So now they have a staff together, and they're ready to make a run. Trinidad Chambliss, Kawan Lacey, this defense, they feel really good about what they have now in Oxford, Mississippi.
So Ole Miss will have a home game, the biggest game in the history of Ole Miss football.
The Grove will be buzzing.
It will be. Yeah. They will win the party, and they'll try to win the game. Another home game, seeded 7th. Gig'em Mike Elko's team lost its regular season finale at Texas, kept them out of the SEC championship game. Good consolation prize, home game with the winner getting Ohio State.
And I got to be honest, if I'm A&M, I have a bit of a gripe, frankly, because A&M, you look at their strength of schedule played, they're sitting there at 16. They're sitting one spot behind Ole Miss, whose strength of schedule resides at 41. You can say, well, the best win for Ole Miss, Oklahoma. Well, they went to Notre Dame and knocked off the Irish, who might be a top 10 team and a college football playoff team as well. So the first disagreement I have so far, but still, A&M, excellent football team. It'll be a difficult matchup for everybody.
And then the final team to get a home game in this year's college football playoff, Oklahoma. Now, the Sooners have struggled mightily on offense. Their defense is tough, and we had 3 SEC home games.
And you mentioned the offense. I don't know that I've seen a team in the past few weeks that have defensively made plays when they need to, whether it's a blocked field goal, whether it's a pick six. When their offense has been struggling, the defense has stepped up and made plays, created opportunities to make it easier on their offense. If they can play that way, they have a chance to make a run, but their offense has to get better.
Okay, these are the teams that have the home games, and while I agree with Greg, there's a lot that you could dispute about Ole Miss and Texas A&M and the order there. This was the relatively easy part for the committee.
Here we go.
Okay, now, because of what we mentioned again, I just want to emphasize this. I'm not trying to talk to everybody like they're kindergartners, but just remember, 2 more conference champions have to go into the field. They are highly unlikely to be ranked in the top 12, so they're going to displace 2 teams in the rankings. So that means there are only 2 spots left. These are the contestants. Alabama, which lost in the SEC championship game, and the much ballyhooed debate between Notre Dame and Miami. So, number 9, who will go to Norman to take on Oklahoma? And it's Alabama who didn't move.
Alabama didn't even drop to 10.
Had Alabama sitting on the bubble, they'll get a chance to avenge that game.
Yeah, and I think when you look at this, you kind of saw it going in this direction already with Ohio State being 2. A team that also lost their conference championship game. They weren't overly penalized. They dropped just 1 spot and flipped to the team right behind them to acknowledge the head-to-head. I think they clearly drew conclusions about Alabama based on a 12-game sample size. And that's the way it should be evaluated when you take into account the teams they were being evaluated against had just 12 data points to evaluate. So Alabama needing to get back on track offensively, need desperately to get healthy. But they have an opportunity, like you said, Reese, to avenge that regular season loss.
But, you know, I will say this. I understand the concept of not being overly punitive for a conference championship game. But if you're going to play them, they need to have stakes both ways to win the conference championship and what happens if you lose.
They have to count somehow. And we're talking about Alabama maybe having the best win in the sport by going to Athens. They also have one of the worst losses by losing to Florida State.
No question.
So we just cannot erase that. I'm surprised at this move right here.
Okay, but the one thing, we'll have time for this. You have to define loss. By record, absolutely. If you go by power rankings, Florida State's still top 30. I'm not trying to excuse it. I'm just saying all of these things you factor in and try to define them. So now we're basically back where we started. There's 1 spot left in terms of at-large teams.
Yeah,
and
Miami, Notre Dame.
Certainly is going to be Miami or Notre Dame. So, number 10, and it is Miami. Without playing.
Wow.
That's tough for Notre Dame. That's so tough.
Notre Dame had been ranked ahead of them the entire time. And now they flipped them, Joey.
Yeah, this is very strange to me. And again, Reese, you mentioned earlier that they hadn't compared these 2 teams. Well, why not? They're humans, and they should have absolutely compared these 2 teams. We had a ranking come out on Tuesday. If they were going to flip these 2 teams that did not play, they should have done it on Tuesday. Now, this Miami team, the way they're playing the last few games, they are a very good football team. They have a chance to win just like any other team. But it is strange to me that you have 2 teams that were sitting on the couch yesterday that somehow flipped in their rankings.
I want to take just a second, then I'll let you make your point, Booger. There's not a lot of difference in terms of the entire body of work if you're looking at the analytics. Notre Dame's a little bit higher in FPI, which is a forward-looking measure. They're basically the same everywhere else.
So here's the thing, to your point. We do this week in and week out, and it's a beauty pageant. Now that the season is done, it's a resume contest. And so it's very easy to go back and compare these 2 teams when it comes to the resume contest, because now the head-to-head has to come into effect.
Their resume didn't change from Tuesday.
I know, but everybody's resume is complete from the standpoint of their
resume was already complete. But today doesn't change their resume. It was complete when we had the ranking on Tuesday. And so if we're going to make sense of this, as we're trying to watch it play out, if you want it to make sense, then make sense. If the resume was done on Tuesday, and on Tuesday Notre Dame was a better football team, and the resume has not changed a lick. Two teams were sitting on the couch. Somehow, that flipped.
There was one team between them and BYU that lost. It's now moved back. Now, if they're right next to each other, we're assuming BYU's moved back. We don't know that for certain.
Yeah, but Greg, it's true. But the way they do it, it's in larger groups. They should have already been compared. I don't differ with the decision.
Correct.
But now nothing. I agree with Joey. Nothing's changed prior to this.
But everybody's resume is now done, and at that point,
their resume was already done.
But the entire season is now done, and now we have to compare the head-to-head, guys, and that's what rules.
It should have been. And they should have gone back and watched it like I did, and like I think several others did. When you watched that game, it might have been a 3-point margin. It felt like
what
more.
makes you think they didn't?
They did. I think they absolutely.
They probably did.
Yeah, so they probably did.
Now, this is obviously the most hot-button topic among these three teams, and we'll have plenty of time for that. But there are two more teams waiting.
Oh, we got two more. Let's go.
We've got two more conference champions to get in. You have to have 5. So the 4th highest-ranked conference champion, number 11, is Tulane. By the way, this just in. We've seen this before. Ole Miss won by 5 touchdowns in the regular season. They played Tulane, champion of the American, had a terrific season, but the Green Wave at their watch party in New Orleans, and there they are. John Summerall, before he heads off to be the head coach of Florida, will coach his team throughout the playoff. And how about that? There's another little twist on this matchup. John Summerall is going to Florida. Pete Golding's now permanent head coach, but Ole Miss without Lane Kiffin.
You mentioned the 5 touchdowns. We also saw Duke in Virginia. It was a rematch last night, and Duke came out. Duke lost by 17, I think, the first time. So just because it was a blowout the first time doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a 5 touchdown. John Summerall is a good coach. I think he'll have his team ready to play.
Okay, let's go to the last spot, the team that will go to Eugene to take on Oregon. And it is James Madison. So you have 2 group of 5 teams in there, and it's the ACC champion not making it is a little bit alleviated by the fact that they got a large team in the field, and the streamers are flying at JMU. Bob Chesney's on his way out too, but he will continue to coach the Dukes.
And good for them too. If you watch that football team, they are a team in every possible way. Ton of respect for what they do offensively and defensively. I think Bob Chesney is a revolutionary. This guy is big time, an incredible hire by UCLA, but man, he's got business to attend to, because going on the road to Eugene will be a massive task, but I think that team is tough, man. They'll be tough to beat.
Okay, a little bit anticlimactic, and this will probably sting. First team out, I assume, is...
Should be Notre Dame.
Yep. Notre Dame. I mean, I don't think that's a huge surprise. The Irish, it has to be gut-wrenching for them after being in the field pretty firmly until last week, then sitting on the bubble and then getting bumped. Second team out is BYU. There are only 2 losses, both to Texas Tech, both decisively. Kalani Sitake has an excellent team, but the committee deems not quite enough to make it into the field. Notre Dame is the team that is on the outside looking in. It is a team that I know Kirk Country joins us again now. Kirk, I've said I thought Notre Dame, if you just looked at the tape, if you just watched them play, one of the 5 best teams in college football right now. So, Kirk, let's start with you, as Nick and Chris Fowler have joined us as well. What's your reaction to what you just saw?
Like we talked about before they released the rankings, I think, again, it became a debate between Miami and Alabama. I think they got the nod. I think Miami and Notre Dame, I think the head-to-head that Joey's talking about, one of the things that I think is interesting based on what we've always been trained is, and I know the Tuesday night show creates some drama, and it creates a lot of heartache and headache for a lot of people to understand, but they really don't feel that their rankings are true until they get all of the data in. And with BYU losing a second time convincingly, even though Miami didn't play, Notre Dame didn't play, that put BYU behind Miami.
Not Miami.
And now
Alabama and BYU lose convincingly. Alabama doesn't move, BYU
It's hard to
moves.
justify how can a team go by when neither team played. they would tell you in that room that we needed all the games played, all the games finished, and now we can see that Miami and Notre Dame were next to each other, and last week has nothing to do, in their minds, with this week and their final rankings. So it's not like the AP poll where every single week we follow and react to what happened. This is, to me, a mistake and misleading because of having these Tuesday night shows and having Miami so far away from Notre Dame. It's easy to say, guys, while they should have had Miami ahead of Notre Dame all along. Well, Miami had two tough losses in games they controlled against SMU and Louisville and gave them both away. There had to be some kind of reaction from the committee and a punishment from the committee, but Miami did what they needed to do. They kept climbing the ladder, getting close enough. They did their job on the field, and eventually, even though they didn't play, Notre Dame didn't play, the committee felt that with BYU's second loss to Texas Tech in convincing fashion, they should go beneath Miami. And again, that's where the head-to-head mattered, and that's why they ended up flipping Miami and Notre Dame.
Kirk, I'm going to talk to Hunter Yurachek about this, but in their protocol for ranking teams, the head-to-head should have mattered. It doesn't mean it has to be exclusively the most important thing. It doesn't mean that they have to put Miami in front. All I'm saying is that I don't think we should create the idea that they couldn't really consider it until they were right beside each other. That's not really how their protocol is set up. I want to go to Nick here. Nick, you see how this has turned out. What's your reaction to this decision and how the playoff rankings look?
Right. I think the fact of the matter is all three of those teams should have gotten in and deserve the right to play in the college football playoff. And for years now, we have kept tweaking the criteria of how we select teams to be in the playoff, whether it was a 2-team BCS, whether it's a 4-team playoff, and now 12-team playoff. But really, I think that you're going to have 2 teams in the playoff, no disrespect to the group of 5, that are nowhere near ranked as highly as some other teams that are much better than them. And I think that maybe something that we can learn from this, because, to me, this has got to be devastating for Notre Dame's team, not to get an opportunity to play in the playoffs, that we can learn something from this that will help us come up with a little better criteria of trying to make sure we get the best 12 teams in the playoff, and also address this whole idea of conference championship games and also the tiebreakers that get you in the conference championship game, and each conference has a significant impact, on what happens in this whole thing. So I don't think there was a good answer for all this. I'm happy for the teams that got in, and I think the committee did a really good job. I just think there was one team left out that I just don't think should have been left out some kind of way, but there was no way around it.
To Nick's point, just to illustrate that, Miami lost out on a tiebreaker, 5-way tie for second place in the ACC. Had they played in the ACC championship game, since they were the highest ranked team, they would have either won their way in, it would have created another at-large spot instead of having 2 teams from the group of 5 if they had won, or they would have lost, and we wouldn't have had this controversy. Chris Fowler with us now. Chris, you've watched this.
The ACC needs to change their tiebreaker rules so that
I think this is probably as controversial and difficult a decision as we've had in the entire playoff era.
I agree, Reese. This is a bracket that's going to be talked about forever, really. And not just because Notre Dame got excluded, but because of the framework that created the choices the committee had to make. And Nick talks about tweaks. There was a tweak after last season, what people didn't like about it. There's going to be something more than a tweak, I think, going forward, because all of a sudden, inclusivity, which most people in the sport think is a pretty good idea. Even Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the deepest conference, thinks that you can't have group of 5 conferences play and have it mean absolutely nothing the entire season if there's not a possibility of getting in the CFP. So inclusivity sounds good until teams like Notre Dame and Texas and Vanderbilt get squeezed out. Then people have a serious problem with it. But this is one we're going to talk about for a long, long time. If you're Notre Dame, you're crushed. They were worried about this. I know they projected confidence. There was a lot of unease on the part of Marcus Freeman and others because they saw them drop last week, and now in consecutive weeks without playing, they have dropped in the rankings, and it ends up costing them despite a 10-game winning streak to finish the season. Having said that, I have no problem with Miami getting in based on a head-to-head, even though it was early in the season. They won that game at the line of scrimmage, held perhaps the best player in the sport, Jeremiah Love, who could win the Heisman, will certainly be there as a finalist in New York on Saturday, to 33 yards on 10 carries. So that was real. It was a late field goal that won it, but it still matters, and I think has to matter, or there's no incentive to schedule any kind of meaningful non-conference game. That's not the committee's job to protect that, or the committee's job to protect, with a sentimental eye, conference championship games, but those are also in danger, as we know, going forward.
You know, we said on game day Saturday, Roy Kramer, who was the architect of the SEC championship game, just passed away over this past weekend. It's one of his greatest contributions to the sport, but so much has changed. Maybe that's about to change as well because of these ramifications. Sometimes there's more risk involved than reward. Nick, what's your reaction to all of this?
Well, there's one thing I wanted to add, and Chris kind of made it a point about the tweaking in the future, is I think you have 10 teams that are getting evaluated on one set of criteria in this year's polling, and you have 2 teams that are getting in the playoffs evaluated on a whole different set of criteria based on 5 conference championships, the highest 5 conference championships getting in. And I think some kind of way we've got to bring that to balance, that we shouldn't be evaluating teams in the playoff with a different set of criteria, which is definitely the case the way it had to be done this year, the way things worked out.
And conferences, in many respects, aren't even really conferences anymore. They're sort of scheduling conglomerates or associations as well. Kirk, as you've looked at this, had a few more minutes to think about it, what else are you thinking in terms of this decision, potentially having thresholds for conference champions to get automatic bids? What are your thoughts?
I think Chris and Coach bring up a couple really good points. JMU and Tulane getting in, I don't think anybody has a problem with a group of 5 teams getting in. I do think that it would be great if there was some kind of ceiling for them to have to, or some kind of barometer for them to have to get up to be able to qualify to get in. Because you do, at the end of the day, what they told us at the beginning of this is we want the best 12 teams in this. And I'm not saying JMU and Tulane won't prove to maybe be some of the 12 teams, but we have Notre Dame and Vandy and Texas sitting at home in the years that they had and what they went through this year. It'd be great if we had 16 teams. Maybe that's the next answer. Let's get this thing up to 16 teams and see what we can do. But I think at the end of the day, conference championships, when you look at Alabama and you look at Notre Dame, having to play that extra game for Alabama, the way that game was looking, 21-0, which direction was this going to be an embarrassment for Alabama? I don't know. Maybe that would have been different, but playing in that extra game, looking at what Notre Dame had been through, I think they played 4 teams, Power 4 teams with 4-8 record or worse. As they looked at them side by side, I think playing in that bonus game, end of the day, did not hurt Bama, and they didn't want to set that precedent. I think Greg mentioned that earlier.
Kirk, that's interesting. We brought this up on game day Saturday, that if you looked at the paper, the data, the metrics, you probably favored Alabama and Oklahoma for that matter. And maybe if you watched the tape, you leaned a little bit more to Notre Dame and Miami in terms of the way they've looked in recent days. Guys, thanks. We'll keep an eye on this. Of course, all these guys be heavily involved.
I guess for me, again, the biggest surprise on all of that is just that Bama didn't even fall to 10. They're still 9.
Break all of this down.
I figured for sure they'd be 10th.
I think it's a really good concept to have thresholds for everybody to meet, whether that's ranking, whether that's computer metric or something, because you have teams that are going to be ranked near the bottom of the rankings that are displacing teams higher. Now, that may be okay a little bit. I don't know if it's top 20, if it's top 16, if it's top 12. But it seems like some type of threshold is probably what's going to happen in the future.
It does, because we tried to create an exception to include the group of 5. And I think to your point earlier, Joy, we have teams on the sideline that absolutely could win a championship right now. No one in America, aside from JMU or Tulane, think that JMU or Tulane can win a championship this year. Like, that's the matter of fact. But they're in it because we had to include them based on the parameters that we were given. And I think that's going to rub a lot of people the wrong way. I don't know what those thresholds could be, but we're trying to include teams to make them a part of this, when I think everyone knows that, yeah, they're good, but can they play with the big boys on a year in and year out? I don't know if that's the case, and I think that's what's going to rub Notre Dame, Texas, and Vanderbilt, because they could absolutely get hot and win it this season.
I agree with you, and I don't think I have as big a problem with JMU and Tulane getting in as a lot of people will. Do we believe they could win it? Absolutely not. I think they should be included. I don't know what the fix is to make people feel better, but in a season, and this is the first time we've seen this, the first time it's happened where 2 of them got in.
Right.
And so in this season, they got in. I'm happy for JMU. I'm happy for Tulane, and I'm okay with that. The big boys had their opportunities. You always look back through these seasons. We've all done it. We've all played.
And let's say you take out the 2 G5 teams and Notre Dame and BYU get in. You still have Texas and Vanderbilt are the first teams out then. You just move the line down.
And we're not talking about JMU.
Texas still isn't happy.
They got in. That's how it is. We'll tweak it. I don't know what the fix is.
Well, the thing is, I do want to point out that I'm talking about best practice for the future. Under the current rules, I've got zero problem.
Absolutely.
No problem whatsoever. The question becomes, is this best practice? Our conference championship game is best practice anymore.
I think one thing we can do to just immediately fix it is take a good deep dive into tiebreaker scenarios for all these conference championship games. Because guess what?
Yeah,
if
I agree
Miami
with that
right
for
now
sure.
is playing
it should be
as
the
a
rankings.
conference champion participant, and they win that game last night against Virginia, we don't have this conversation.
Yep.
Notre Dame's in 2, and we don't have JMU, which to me I think would make some sense. That's what we got to fix first. We have bloated conferences. We have 18 teams in the Big Ten. It worked out this year in the Big Ten. The 2 best teams were playing in the conference championship game. Was that the case in the SEC? Maybe, maybe not. Was it the case in the ACC? Absolutely not. Was it the case in the Big 12 this year? Yes. Yeah. I think we need to look at how we're sending teams to the conference championship before we start to rip up the conference championship automatic berth. Because if we can just get the 2 best teams that were ranked from a metric standpoint, from a BCS standpoint, use the computers. I don't care. Use Sagarin ratings. I could care less. Take the 2 best teams in every conference, rank them accordingly, and those top 2 are the ones that are playing for the title as opposed to all these confusing tiebreaker scenarios.
Again, too, congratulations to Duke. They get the trophy.
Absolutely.
But a 5-loss team being in your conference championship game created a lot of this. Herbie, my friend Herbie was waving his finger over there. Herbie, you wanted something you wanted to add here right quick before we talk to Hunter Yurachek and look at a bracket here?
Yeah, I love hearing when you guys trying to spin us forward like what the answer is. And I think what all of us want is whether it's 12 or hopefully eventually it gets up to 16, is just whether it's computers and committee, a mixture of that, whatever the answer is. I just think at the end of the day, you rank them, whatever their conference affiliation is, throw that out, have 5 automatic qualifiers, and then from after that, just whatever it is, 1 to 16. If you get up into that ranking, you're in. If you're outside of it, you're out. There's no, what about this? Should we get this? It's just whatever the ranking is. That would be a beautiful future. Just to go back to what Coach Saban said, we all just want the best teams in. And however we get there subjectively, like I said, if it's a mixture of committee with computers, Sagarin ratings, whatever it is, just come up with a way to just rank them and not worry about, well, we've already got too many from this conference. We don't have enough from this conference. Whatever the rankings are, just spit it out, play it, and we all get what we really want, which the best teams in. If it's group of 5, great. If it's not, too bad. And let's just rank the teams and play the best teams.
All right, I mean, it's a fair point for the future, but, the good thing is at some point in this show, we're going to just put this to the side, get fired up about the games. We've still got some ground to cover in that regard, but right now, want to show you how the games are set up and where the bowl games will be.
We have time.
There you go. We got time, and you've got other opportunities as well. So I'm going to go up and walk up a little bit closer so my old eyes can see these things. You've got Oregon and James Madison. That will be on Saturday night, 7:30 Eastern time. The first game of the playoff will be Alabama and Oklahoma at 8 o'clock Eastern time, the 8-9 matchup. Then the noon game on ESPN ABC.
Have Bama and Oklahoma ever played on Friday night before in their histories?
And Texas A&M. That will be on ESPN and ABC. And then the other game that will be on TNT, ESPN produced. Your familiar announcers there, Tulane and Ole Miss in the rematch. That will be the afternoon game on Saturday, December 20th. So that's how it looks. You see the bowl game set up as well. Orange Bowl for Texas Tech, Rose for Indiana, Sugar for
Oregon's going to come to the Rose Bowl.
Cotton for Ohio State.
Ole Miss is going to play Georgia
awaiting the winners,
again.
And there are some fascinating potential second-round matchups or quarterfinal matchups in the bowl games once we get there.
Yeah,
We're joined by the chair of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, Hunter Yurachek. Hunter, thank you for being with us. I've said that I think this is the most difficult and controversial decision in the 12-year history of the playoff, whether it's 4 teams or 12 teams. The obvious question is first, You moved Miami ahead of Notre Dame. Neither team played. Every single ranking up to this point, you had it the other way. Why, without benefit of another game being played, did this change?
Well, Reese, first and foremost, the debate I hear you guys having in my ear in the studio, I'm sure has been debated over the last 12 hours, and that was the debate we had in our committee room into the early morning hours, and then again as the sun was coming up. And the first move in that was we felt like the way BYU performed in their championship game, a second loss to Texas Tech in a similar fashion, was worthy of Miami moving ahead of them in the rankings. And once we moved Miami ahead of BYU, then we had that side-by-side comparison that everybody had been hungering for with Notre Dame and Miami. And you look at those two teams on paper, and they're almost equal in their schedule strength, their common opponents, the results against their common opponents. But the one metric we had to fall back on, again, was the head-to-head. I charged the committee members to go back and watch that game again, the Miami-Notre Dame game, because it was so far back. And we got some interesting debate from our coaches on what that game looked like as we watched it. And with that in mind, we gave Miami the nod over Notre Dame into that 10 spot.
But, Hunter, the way you guys go about ranking teams, you don't just have them rank their best 25 and everybody adds it up and do the math. I mean, the head-to-head, these teams had, almost by mathematical definition, had to be in the same group to be evaluated prior to this. I don't have a problem with the outcome. I'm asking about the process. So you're telling me that head-to-head never really came up until they were ranked side by side? That seems to be different from the process of ordering and ranking the teams that you guys go through.
Maurice, if you recall, Miami was a loser of 2 of 3 when they entered the poll at 18, and they were in close proximity to Louisville at the time, who I believe was below them in 21st or 22nd spot. And we didn't use the head-to-head metric to compare Miami and Louisville. Louisville, a team who had beat Miami. But not until they really got in close proximity, side by side, with the move with BYU, were we able to evaluate just those two teams side by side.
What point does the head-to-head matter
between them, whether it was
apparently it hasn't mattered until they
Alabama
literally
BYU,
are right next to each other.
BYU
That's kind of crazy.
Week.
Okay, but I still need a little further explanation on why this matters, because they've been, it is accurate to say that at some point in this process prior to this weekend, that at least in the group of teams, the 6, and when you go to 4 and carry them over and all of that, that Miami and Notre Dame have been in the same group for evaluation. Is that correct?
That is correct, Reese.
Okay, so why is it that they had to be ranked side by side with no one between them for the head-to-head to carry the day?
As I mentioned last week in last week's rankings, we thought Notre Dame was better than BYU and deserved to be ranked higher than BYU. And we thought BYU deserved to be ranked higher than Miami, and that's the way that laid out. After the championship game in the Big 12 and the way BYU performed again against Texas Tech, we felt like Miami deserved to be ranked ahead of BYU. And then you had the direct head-to-head comparison of those teams, Miami and Notre Dame, sitting respectively at 10 and 11 in our poll.
Okay, Hunter, I appreciate your time. I know I've drilled down on this, but I have a couple more that I think are pretty important. What impact did the fact that there was potential that the ACC would not have a representative because Duke had 5 losses and they were the conference champions?
Yeah, how close was Duke to them?
What impact did that have on the discussion in the room when it came to Miami and Notre Dame, or just Miami's inclusion overall?
Reese, it had absolutely no impact. Our charge as a selection committee is to rank the top 25 teams, and then you peel out the 5 highest conference champions and the 7 at-large teams, and that's what we did to fill out that bracket. And Miami ended up being one of the 7th highest at-large teams, and that's why they're in the playoff.
Okay, as I said, I've got zero problem with
the ACC wasn't otherwise going to have a representative.
Yeah, I have no problem with the outcome. We're just talking process here. And so the same question about Alabama. I think Alabama pretty clearly had the best metrics, best resume of the 3 teams. However, they hadn't played well, and they did not play well in the conference championship game. So, and that was to Georgia's credit. Georgia played brilliantly. Yeah. What was the selection committee's perspective on conference championship game performance, and what could happen to you punitively if you did have a day like Alabama had yesterday?
Yeah, we evaluated all of those conference championship games and felt like in the end, regardless of Alabama's performance yesterday, their body of work in those first 12 games where they had probably the best win, arguably this season, winning at number 3 Georgia, having a win against Vanderbilt, wins against Tennessee as well. Their strength of schedule was the highest in the top 11, and we felt like in spite of their performance yesterday in the conference championship, they deserve to stay in that 9 spot.
Okay, let's do one that's a little bit less controversial, but Greg McElroy brought it up, and it was a great point. Ole Miss, Texas A&M. A&M has some metrics that are a little bit better, similar records and all of that, and it would appear right now that Ole Miss got an easier path than A&M did, at least to start. What was the thought process behind how you wound up ranking Ole Miss's spot ahead of Texas A&M?
Yeah, we looked at that 5 through 8 corridor of teams that were there. All of them did not play. We did not see a reason to move any of those teams based on anything that happened in the conference championship games this weekend.
Hunter, we appreciate you. This has been a difficult thing. I appreciate you for standing in there and explaining the thought process of the committee. And one thing I'd like to point out, and I think you would agree with this, a lot of times when you come to these decisions on the final day, it appears on the outside that every single person in this room thought one way one week, and everybody
I can't wait
thought
to get on the
another
internet
way the next.
see
It takes a
everyone
couple
melting
guys,
down.
a couple of people to change their minds, to change the outcome. Fair?
That's fair, Reese, and I just want to make sure that Coach Saban realizes I answered all of your questions this morning.
Yeah, he gave you a little bit of a, what does he like to call them, a rear end chewings, I think, or something like that. But Hunter, thanks a lot. I appreciate your very difficult job. Yeah. We appreciate you spending time with us as always. That is Hunter Yurachek.
So how about Indiana going to the Rose Bowl for the first time ever?
Someday.
Also, never been number 1 before, ever.
Yeah, I don't want in there now. I don't want to end race. That's too much.
That'll be covered in the lead up to the game, but that's just crazy.
This is the way the 12-team field will look. Hey, look, there's some controversy. There are things to answer for. Notre Dame has to be devastated for sure. BYU disappointed. I'm sure Vanderbilt and Texas are as well. But this is going to be exciting. It's going to be amazing. You've got some terrific teams in here. You've got some balanced teams and a lot of teams that can make runs. So let's look at the rest of the rankings and the next team out, Texas, who beat Vanderbilt head-to-head. They're 1 spot ahead of them.
And I like where Texas is from a playing standpoint. Arch Manning starting to play his best football. Just not good enough this year to get into the playoff.
USC at 16 proved to be Notre Dame's best win. Perhaps that had an impact as well. Arizona, what a season it had. The Wildcats moving up to 17. And Virginia, who missed a chance to go to the playoff, losing to Duke in the ACC title game. They go to 19, and there's your next playoff participant. So you have a team ranked 20th displacing a team from the playoff in 2.
And I'll be honest with you, I'm surprised Tulane didn't jump in front of Virginia with the way Virginia played against Duke. But congratulations again to Tulane getting in the playoff.
And so the rest of the rankings round out this way. And James Madison is 24th, so you have 2 teams ranked in the 20s, pushing out teams in the field to make sure that
so now with the AP poll, we get to see the next teams that are receiving votes, so you can sort of figure out 26 through 35. But with the committee, you don't get to know that. We don't know where Duke is. Is Duke 26? I doubt it.
With Indiana. They didn't penalize teams that participated in conference
but I'd like to know how
championships
close
and
they
lost.
got.
That's a precedent that was set last year with SMU and will likely carry forward as long as we're in this current format.
So those are the final rankings. Remember, there aren't post-playoff rankings. The playoff takes care of itself now, so the committee's work is done. Coming up, our college football playoff top 25, the head coach of the #1 team in the land.
That's a bad man right there.
Yes, he is.
That is a bad man.
Big Ten champion coach will join us coming up.
This is the College Football Playoff Selection Show, presented by AT&T.